Gus, welcome to the podcast. Huge shout out to our guy Travis for getting us connected there, man. For people who aren't familiar with you and all the incredible work you're doing in the space, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all that you got going on, man?
Yeah, sure. So, Gus, to my friends, Karl Gustavson, retired Navy SEAL, did 22 years in the SEAL teams, including 16 years of development group. Retired in 2024. And shortly after I retired, about 6 months after, I took a position as director of operations with a nonprofit called Community First Project, C1P. And what we do is we basically take the tactics that we learned as SEALs, and we use those to train law enforcement how to more effectively, more efficiently respond to active shooter situations. So the big part of being a 501c3, obviously, is that we do it at no cost to the departments, which means we go out hat in hand and we ask people for money, we fundraise, we host everything from musical cocktail hours out on Nantucket to get-togethers in Boston to fundraisers and tactical games down in Austin, Texas, and all kinds of different things, just in order to get us enough money to go out and train the different departments in these different places. We're a young, basically 501c3. We've only been in existence for about 3 years, since 2022. And so we're looking to expand right now. A lot of what we do is in Florida, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Texas, a little bit in Virginia, North Carolina, and looking to expand now into Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, California, and kind of those areas. So that's a little bit about us. You can check us out at c1p.org, c1p.org, and we are a community first project. And so that's kind of takes up a lot of my time right now. And then, as you know, Dan, I got my hand in a bunch of other different projects and trying to keep myself busy, in retirement.
Absolutely, man. And I think that you are someone who has no issue staying busy from what I've gotten to know about you. And just to kind of run everything back that you just outlined there, Gus. First off, thank you for your service, man. I appreciate you and all that you and all the individuals like you out there have given for people like me to be able to wake up every day and not think about, who in the world is going to come after us today. Y'all have given a lot for us, and I think a lot of times people maybe don't fully recognize and realize that. And second off, the work you all do at Community First is absolutely incredible, and I'm very appreciative of organizations like that out there. I mean, I think I can't remember the stat, but I feel like in 2021 there was like more gun deaths per day than any of the past 6 years or something ridiculous like that. Like,
Mm.
I don't think it's a secret that gun violence is up, and I don't think it's a secret that the first responder community is suffering as a result, whether that's just safety on the job or even just consideration of self-harm and other things just due to the stress that exists in that day-to-day line of work, right? Like, I don't think a first responder should have to be wondering if they're going to be able to make it home that night because of the actions of another individual intentionally set out to harm them. Like, I think ideally we live in a world where none of that exists, but until we get there, I think the work that you all do helping to prep those individuals to make sure they come home to their families every night is absolutely incredible. And I think we need more of that. So I really commend you guys for all that you're doing.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. And, one of the things that brought me to this work, and in fact, in a roundabout way, this is how I met Travis. I ran a big exercise for my team when I was still active duty. We were out in Kansas City. So we went and did, it's called realistic urban training, or RUT, RUT. And we would go to these major metropolitan areas and we would work hand in hand with law enforcement in those cities. And they would set up some, like, quote unquote target buildings for us. And then we would go do like our simulated target takedowns, and, we'd use the helicopters and all that different kind of thing. And it was like our big culmination exercise of the training block that we were doing. So I got to go out, plan and execute this trip out in Kansas City. And along the way, we did some of our training in Arrowhead Stadium. We got to meet with Andy Reid and the ownership of the Chiefs. And Travis was one of the guys who was at the facility. So I got to meet him and hang out with him a little bit, and they were super gracious. But the law enforcement in Kansas City helped us out a lot. In fact, they were indispensable in helping us conduct the training and get everything set up. They're super great guys. Two of my good friends, um, Dave Jackson and Eben Hall, really helped us put the training together. And then as a give back to the law enforcement community, at the end of that training exercise, we would bring their cops in and we'd run them through some of our scenarios and get them some training. And so that was sort of the genesis of us getting to work with local law enforcement, right? Because a lot of people think military law enforcement, they do a lot the same job, but one is overseas and one is here domestically, and they don't really cross paths. But there is a lot of carryover between what they do and what we do. And for sure, for me, like I have a tremendous amount of gratitude to the men and women of law enforcement for keeping my friends and my family safe at home while I was overseas doing business for 22 years. And so now coming back, I'm like, hey, here's all these skills, all these things I've learned over 22 years in the SEAL teams. What can I do now to sort of show my appreciation for those men and women of law enforcement? And how can we make it accessible to the people that need it most, right? The people that are going out there that are overworked, underpaid, possibly undertrained. How can we make this training accessible to them? And I think that was sort of the idea, the mindset behind starting a nonprofit to train law enforcement is that we want even the people, even the departments that don't have a lot of discretionary funds to go out and hire some of these big training companies. We want to make it within reach for those folks, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's one of those things, kinda like we've mentioned, like, this is the kind of stuff that can literally save a life that way, right? And I think that's
Absolutely.
or multiple, really, and I think that it's one of those things that ultimately you can't put a price on that long term, like, it's something that I think the more we can get this out there, the better that way, and I also think this is something that a lot of people maybe don't fully understand the most about, and I'm probably included in that myself, right? Like, we talk with PTs, ATs, strength coaches, chiros, college and pro athletes, and a lot of times I don't think they fully understand and appreciate all that goes into what I would call the tactical athlete. I don't care if we're talking EMS, if we're talking police, if we're talking active duty military, reserve military, whatever we're talking that way, the physical fitness level that you have to be in is just
Mhm.
on another level. And it's not just fitness to perform, it's fitness that can literally mean the difference between living to see another day and, getting injured, wounded, or not even seeing the next day that comes. And I found that there is a motivational fire in this population that is like nothing I've ever seen before. And I've heard several stories from friends of mine who have worked with Army and Navy, cadets that way from a strength and conditioning standpoint. And they're like, "Our issue is trying to get them to do less," they'll literally be playing a D1 sport at Army or a
Mhm.
D1 sport at Navy, and in addition to playing their sport and doing all their expected PT, they go for 10-mile rucks for fun in their free time because
Yeah.
that's just what they feel they need to do to be ready for this, and it's just such a different animal, in my opinion. So what kind of things do you feel like people maybe don't fully understand or maybe have misconceptualized about this kind of, group that way, if you will?
Yeah, one of the things I think there's a couple of things that people don't tend to think a lot about law enforcement. You used a term that I really like, which is tactical athlete, right? A lot of people don't think about police maybe as being tactical athletes in the way that they think about maybe people think about, SEALs or Rangers or something is maybe there's a component of athleticism there because we're a high performing, top tier. But they don't think of maybe the rest of the military or they don't think of law enforcement. But one of the things that's really interesting is that, the things that they're doing, law enforcement professionals, they're doing their job every day in and day out, wearing 30 to 40 pounds of kit, body armor, heavy belt, tactical gear, everything that they have to wear to do their job. And, whereas you might look at an athlete and think, well, what makes them athletic is the ability to accelerate, to stop on a dime, to perform these incredibly complex movements, or we were talking about PVR, to get on a bull, to ride that bull for 8 seconds, to perform that, incredibly challenging athletic endeavor. And so we don't think about it at that scale with law enforcement, but the things that they're doing, those guys might have to get out of their car with all their equipment on after having sat for 45 minutes or an hour, engage in a full sprint to take down a perpetrator or something like that, hand-to-hand combat with that guy, mixed martial arts type stuff. And again, in all that equipment, there is a high level of athleticism that goes into that, but people just don't think about it. And so they don't think, well, we need to allocate funds to getting them proper PTs and proper workout equipment and making sure that they're, being seen and being considered as an athlete of sorts and thought of in that regards. And then I think the other thing that people don't think about a lot of the time is the incredible amount of stress that they're put under. It's not like an athlete where you have a game day once a week. You go out on Sunday and you play the big game, or you go out on Saturday and play a doubleheader. These guys are 8 to 12 hour shifts, 5 days a week. They're always on. Their adrenal fatigue is immense. And so I think a lot of times people think they tend to downplay in their mind the level of what it takes to be a law enforcement officer or, a federal officer or something like that. When in reality, it's super high stress. It's all the time. And these guys are doing careers for 20 or 30 years. And so I think it's definitely something that, from our end, as far as like the tactical component, we're trying to give them the tools to be successful in a very specific environment. And that is when they're going in to engage an active shooter, a barricaded shooter, a school shooter, somebody who's locked themselves in a municipal building or an office building. And we're teaching them and giving them a skill set to go deal with that. But there's so many other facets of what they need, tools that they need to have at their disposal to be successful in their job. And, so I think it's like you said, it's great for people who think about this on the level of like, how can I give them better training? Can I give them an athletic trainer? Can I give them a strength and conditioning coach? Can I give them somebody who's telling them, hey, take a rest day here. Hey, here's physical therapy you can do. Hey, here's some recovery modalities that you ought to be considering. People think about like, oh, you go play the big game and you come back and you take ice bath and you have a masseuse and you go do red light therapy and you do all these other things so you can be ready to start practice again on Tuesday. But for cops, they're like, oh yeah, you just go home, drink a couple beers and go to bed. And you're like, well, it doesn't work that way, right? Athleticism is athleticism. And you need to be doing the same recovery protocols and the same strength and conditioning protocols and block periodization and all those kind of things to be successful in law enforcement, the same way we did in the SEAL teams, the same way PBR bull riders or professional football players, baseball players, they do.
Absolutely, and one of the things that I really wanna hone in on that you brought up is this ability to perform in some of the most stressful situations that you can think of, and there's an exercise that I've used to attempt to simulate this in the past. It doesn't really do it the same way as what you outlined that way, but, we've worked with some firefighters and different individuals in the PT clinics on return to, their activities. And it's like, how do I make sure that they're ready to step into whatever the most dangerous situation, will be when I'm confined by what we have in a PT clinic? Even if it's really well equipped, it's not the same, right? And one of the
Right.
things that I'll do is I'll give them some kind of very specific task, and there's usually a time component to it. So with the firefighter population, usually we have them bring full gear in, and it's timed. How quickly can you put that on? But there's a precursor, because again, as we mentioned, this is a stressful environment, right? So our stressful environment recreation is you got to give me 50 burpees as quick as you can. Yeah, it's down and dirty, and everyone likes to hate on burpees, but let me tell you what, you rev the heart rate up to 200 beats per minute and then try and do a very specific task. It gets very, very difficult, and it's one that I
Mhm.
think literally anyone can try and do that, and it changes everything, right? Like, I don't care if
Mhm.
you're out back shooting a compound bow or whatever, when you rev your heart rate up like that and you fatigue everything, everything is different, and I don't think that there's really, a great way to recreate that environment in training per se, but I think, like, when I say training there, I mean the PT clinic walls or the gym walls per se, but
Mhm.
I think the work that you all do is obviously a huge part of that mental readiness and even just the ability to remain calm when things hit the fan. I think think it was Jocko had a good line about how he was able to kind of step back from certain situations and assess what's going on before proceeding forward that way. And I'd love to hear more about kind of that concept from you, is how you teach operators and tactical athletes to remain calm even in the most stressful situations. How even though when their body is telling them that we're redlining, they're able to stay at a level that they can kind of be aware of everything going on around them, assess it, and act accordingly, because I feel like that's a skill that we're all trying to learn and master here for sure.
Yeah, I think that, there's a term that I really like that I think has become popularized recently. And I've had some really long conversations with a good friend of mine, Dr. Alice Atalanta, who's, she's a PhD, published author, and has worked in and around both the special operations and law enforcement communities. And the term is stress inoculation. And so what do you mean when you're just talking about inoculating somebody against something? You're having you're exposing them to a component of that thing that causes them to build up a resistance to it. So when you're talking about stress inoculation, the necessary component there is you need to give them stress. And you talked about doing burpees, right? And then having them put on their full firefighting kit when their heart rate's already up to 120 or 130 or 150. And there's only in a training environment, like you said, we're confined to the space that we have and the equipment that we have and the ability to induce stress. For us, when I was going through SEAL training, they couldn't shoot live rounds at us, but they could shoot blank rounds. They could throw smoke grenades. They could do all these other things. They could get in our face with a bullhorn. They could make us cold. They could run us down the beach until we were dog tired. And that was how they induced stress. And then they put you in complex problem solving environments where they say, now you have to solve this problem. Or, in second phase and pool phase, what they would do is they take your air away. They come down and tie your regulator hoses and knots, pull the regulator out of your mouth, tear your mask off, and then you have to solve that problem underwater with no air. And so it's stress inoculation. Essentially, all it is exposing you to specific stressors. They're going to spike your heart rate. They're going to make your adrenaline rise. They're going to turn on that uh, you know, sympathetic nervous system, sympathetic response, and they're going to cause you to burn oxygen faster, heart rate to rise, and the whole idea being, I need you to problem solve in this environment, whether that's I make you go run a 400-meter lap as fast as you can and then come back and shoot a pistol qual, or I make you do 50 burpees and then go through this clearance problem because now I know your heart rate's elevated, you're breathing heavy, your mind is racing a little bit, your adrenal response is turned on, your focus of vision is going to narrow, you're going to have some auditory exclusion, and I need to see you in that environment to know that, you know, almost anybody can perform certain tasks in sterile environments where they're not stressed. But the more stress that I induce, the better job I'm doing of teaching you how to inoculate yourself against those high stress environments. And that may be the closest way that I can come to simulating the real world stress of you being attacked by somebody or somebody shooting a gun at you or even just loud protesters getting in your face and screaming at you, because those are the real stresses that you're going to have to deal with in the day-to-day job. So if I'm not doing what I can to inoculate you against that in training, then I'm sort of doing you a disservice. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And as you broke that down, it's one of those things I realize a lot of people, when they hear stress, they immediately think of something negative,
Right.
bad. You should avoid stressful situations and you
Yep.
should remain comfortable. But I don't care if we're talking tactical athletes, if we're talking athletes, if we're talking high performing individuals, right? You want to go run a business, run a company, be a CEO, make millions of dollars. You better be able to handle stress. And I loved your term stress inoculation. Like, I think to sound cliche, the more comfortable you are with being uncomfortable, the better everything is going to fall into place. And I think that, in my mind, is one of the many reasons that tactical operators are so sought after following their careers in the military and in first responder and so on, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of companies out there that look for these people and they hire them left and right because they know their skill sets there that a lot of other people don't have. And I think the ability to handle stressful situations is a huge part of that. And even just how we interpret stress, right? Like, there was a time when stressors meant like you're the 300 going up against the Persians, right? Like, return with your shield or on it. That's stress. Nowadays, people interpret stress in a fight or flight response as the price of cryptocurrency is down.
Right.
And it's like, it's not life or death. See,
It's
for
not. Yeah, it
some
really
reason,
isn't.
we
Yeah.
interpret it like that. So even just kind of like rewiring the body to realize what stress truly actually is, which I can't believe we need that in 2026. But the price of crypto is down. The vape store doesn't have your favorite strawberry flavor, whatever it is that way. Like, these are not life or death situations, and it should not be provoking the same stress response as someone who's literally about to be going into battle, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think you see it in people who come from high stress environments and then they go to work other jobs, or you mentioned veterans, but I would submit to you that high performing athletes too. And they see those people come out of these high stress environments and go into maybe what I would consider a low stress environment, office job or something, and maybe they get heaped with a bunch of tasks one day, or maybe things aren't going well with the business, or quarterly sales earnings are down or something like that, and they're like, how is this guy so unflappable? How is this guy so unbothered by this? And he's just like, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to do this. We need to implement this. We need to make this change. And they just sort of clinically go about fixing the problem in the highest stress, where other people are like melting down. Those kind of people are just like, hey, this is not that big a deal. Let's deal with it. And that's, I think, one of the things that like Jocko and Leif Babin do a really good job of breaking down with their company Echelon Front, and going out and talking to these companies. And all they're doing is saying, hey, here's Battlefield 101. When it's life or death, you can't let the stress overwhelm you, or you're going to get killed. So you have to break it down, take it in manageable chunks, and solve problems one at a time until you get yourself out of that situation. That's the only way to go about it. And so, we try to do that with our law enforcement professionals. But the old adage is, it's better to sweat on the training ground than bleed on the battlefield.
Yeah,
I'd
sweat
rather
more
spend
during peace, bleed less in war.
100%. I'd rather spend 100 hours in the shoot house teaching these guys how to methodically do clearance than watch one of them get shot because they were unprepared in a real world situation. It's like, I'll sweat with you all day long, but what I don't want to happen is you to go into one of those engagements unprepared, which is essentially me sending you into a space where I'm expecting you to fail.
Yeah. No, you summarized that so well. I couldn't have said that any better myself. And I think one of the other pieces that, as you mentioned, kind of attributes to this stress element is that feeling of being unprepared, which on one hand,
Mhm.
we've talked a bit about the individual prep in relation to stress, but on the other hand, there's also a certain element of team preparation and how cohesive and coherent everyone is working together. And this is a space that I feel like many companies, groups, teams are always trying to improve, right? Like, how do we play nice with one another, right? There was a time when some of these individual differences I don't think mattered as much as they seem to nowadays. And people don't want to work together because of certain beliefs or opinions that people have. Even though there's a job to do, they can't seem to put that aside,
Mhm.
or they don't know how to communicate. I can't tell you how many times I go out and instead of people having normal conversations, they're sitting there typing away behind their freaking phone because for whatever reason, we've forgotten how to talk to the person in front
Mhm.
of us. And I think some of these different skill sets that, really go into the success of a team have started to fade away across a wide array of populations that way. And I'd imagine those elements, amongst several others, almost become part of the conversation of making sure the team cohesively is prepared to respond to whatever life throws at them. Because the better prepared the team is, and the more collectively the parts work together to form the whole, the better the entire operation would be from a success rate, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you nailed it there. I think one of the things that it comes down to, and one of the things that we focus a lot on, that people tend to think like, oh, SEALs, they just go out and they're these super tough, fit badasses and they just go do the job and it happens expertly and things just go well because these guys have trained so hard. But the thing that we're really good at is being dynamic when things don't go as planned, right? So it's like we are masters of chaos, is I think the term that you hear thrown around sometimes, because the battlefield is chaotic and you go into it with the best laid plans. Here's how we're going to do this operation. Here's how we're going to go in. Here's how we're going to infill to the target. When we get here, this guy's doing this. This team's doing this. But what really happens is when the bullet starts flying, people have to act and react dynamically. And you have to have two things. Number one, you have to have trained yourself to be okay with a high stress situation where you have to adapt and react. And then number two, you have to have clear, concise communication. So one of the things that takes a bad situation and can turn it around in a hurry on the battlefield is a leader who knows how to clearly and concisely, using as few words but conveying as much meaning as possible, can communicate to his team on the ground exactly what needs to happen. So if you want to take that, scale it back to, now we're peacetime. We're stateside. We're in a corporate sort of setting. It just comes down to having honest conversations with your people on the battlefield. You know, the conversation is going to be honest because it has to be, because if it's not, people die. And so sometimes it's even aggressively honest, right? People's feelings could get hurt. But in the boardroom, it's not necessarily like that. And so people have this sense of like, well, now it's more important to tiptoe around people's feelings. It's more important to dance around the issue. Yeah, I know I need to clearly communicate that this isn't happening the way we need it to. But if I say it the wrong way, this person's going to be triggered and this person's going to take it wrong, or this person's going to shut down or whatever. And so you need to get to that place where the team trusts each other enough that the communication can be open and clear and concise. You can get your point across and everybody can move forward and execute. And I think, like you mentioned, in a day and age where everybody is so used to the anonymity of digital communication, where you can sit in a friend circle and everybody's just texting each other instead of talking face to face, you need to get away from the sort of surrealism of that. You need to get away from the artificiality of that and get back to this idea that we need to be able to have honest conversations with each other, especially if the expectation is we want to be a high performing team.
And knowing, to your point, that honest conversations are not always the easiest, but can also make people feel a little uneasy, right? People don't like to get
Yeah.
called out. People like to be told, "Hey, you need to step it up."
Right.
But it's easier, in my opinion, to be brutally honest with them from the start, and then if you need to later, de-escalate. Because just like you can throttle things up, you can also throttle things down. And if for some reason the truth hurts someone a little too much, we can clear that up. But what we can't clear up is lying in the moment and causing a big mess. So it's one of those things. They say honesty is the best policy. Again, cliche, but it holds true at all times. And it's like you can't argue with the facts of the situation.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you can't argue with the logic behind it. So you can interpret what happens or the perspective differently, but the facts are the facts at the end of the day. And if you stick to those, again, you can get as upset as you want by it, but it doesn't change the fact that exactly what you said is happening is happening.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reality of it, right? Is that real solutions only come from honest conversations. Yeah, bottom line, real solutions only come from honest conversations. So on the one end, you're like, yeah, I don't want to offend my people or whatever. But so a lot of times maybe preface the whole conversation by saying, hey, look, I need everybody to have a little bit of resiliency in this moment. I need you to have a little bit of what Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls anti-fragility. I need you all to be anti-fragile here for a moment. Have a little bounce back because I'm going to say some stuff that's going to be a little hard to hear. But in order for us to get to the point that we want to get to, we need to be having this honest conversation now. If the expectation is we want to arrive at real solutions.
Absolutely. And one of the things, going back to this concept of teamwork for a second, I've found it's easier for people to honestly call out others than themselves. It's so difficult to do an internal audit of yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, and call out your own weaknesses to yourself and say, hey, look, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing that. Whatever that looks like for you listening in 2026, right? Like, whether it's, oh, I shouldn't watch OnlyFans, or I shouldn't, spend 5 hours a day on TikTok, or whatever it is that way. Like, it is so difficult to have
Mhm.
those conversations with yourself. How do you go about encouraging the individuals that you've worked with? And how did you do this yourself, even in the SEALs? Look at yourself and be able to call out the areas that you need to work on in a way that obviously doesn't leave yourself feeling like absolutely demoralized, but is honest and truthful and just kind of mastering that internal personal audit, if you will.
So I think, one of the principles that's reinforced in the SEAL teams right from the beginning is sort of the order of events after you do like whether it's a real world operation or a training mission. When you come back from that, the priority of events is you take care of the team gear, you take care of your personal gear, and then you take care of yourself. So the idea being the team comes before everything, then your gear, your life saving equipment needs to be taken care of, and then you take care of yourself. So, in that sense, the fact that I went about my day to day caring more about taking care of my team and making sure that my team was healthy, making sure that my teammates came back from each mission safe and sound, and making sure that all the guys got home to their families means that if I don't feel like I'm doing my part, if I don't feel like I'm performing at the level that I should, then I'm doing an injustice. I'm essentially shortchanging all of my other teammates because when we go out on target, I'm not going to be able to perform at the highest level, which is going to leave somebody else exposed. So I think and like I said, that's right from the beginning of training, goes throughout the rest of your career, is everybody reemphasizing you need to be at your best so that you can protect your teammates. And then the other thing that we do, at least at the dev group level, was we did peer evaluations. And they're anonymous, but you would do peer evaluations and everybody in the group would rank their top 5 guys, their bottom 5 guys. And from that, you would get a sense of like, okay, if people are putting me in their bottom 5, what am I doing wrong? And it's up to you to sort of make the assessment of like, if people are not even if they're not, and not even if they're putting me in the bottom 5, but if they're not putting me in the top 5, what am I missing? What am I not doing that I could be doing better? And, we have peer-to-peer counseling and we have leadership counseling and you have, these periodic evaluations that you get from your leadership where they give you an honest assessment of what your leadership really thinks you're doing. And I will tell you in the SEAL teams, there's no room for ego and there's no room for you to go around moping with your head down. If somebody tells you like, hey, you're jacked up, that's it. It's either you fix it or you go away.
Yeah.
And so there is very much this concept of like, as much as it's a bunch of high performing dudes who may have a lot of self confidence and maybe even a lot of ego, at some point you have to be able to check that and say, if there's something that I can be doing better, I need to be doing that thing better. And if you don't know what it is, go talk to one of your buddies and be like, hey, am I jacked up? What am I not doing right? What could I be doing better?
Absolutely. It's this high respect, low ego kind of mindset and mentality that is so difficult to develop, yet so essential in every line of work. And I think the other piece that you brought up there is the importance of being willing to have conversations with other people, right? Like I think a lot of times people hear about this mental toughness and they think, oh, that means I've got to keep it all to myself, that I shouldn't talk to other people, that I don't need any type of leadership counsel or anything like that. And it's like, no, if anything, you need it just as much, if not more than other people, right? Like it's one of those things, in order to truly be the best, you need to sometimes have an outside perspective looking in, right? Like,
Yep.
why do you think all these different pro sports teams with billions and billions of dollars hire outside consultants to come in and literally rip apart their organization and find ways that they can be better and improve, right?
Mhm.
They know it works. The same goes for the individual. And I think a lot of the times people think they need to keep this all inside. And it's like there's professionals in this space for a reason. They can help you, you just gotta find a way to, humble yourself enough to ask for help when you need it.
And I think I think that's the crux of real toughness, of real mental toughness, is being able to ask for help or being able to ask somebody, what could I be doing better? Like, give me some peer counseling. And, we're always taught, or I was always taught growing up, look at the person who is doing the thing the way that you want to do it. Look to somebody you want to be able to emulate. Look to somebody you look up to, and then go try and make that person a mentor, right? Go ask that person, how did you get here? You are where I aspire to be. How did you get here? And will you mentor me? And seek that mentorship. But it is so hard, and I'll tell you this from personal experience, to go to somebody who is a peer or maybe even a junior or somebody else who's in an organization where you're expected to perform at a high level, and to go to that person and be like, can you coach me? Can you help me with this? Can you help me be a better shooter? Can you help me be a better jumper? Can you help me be better at, whatever the skill set is that you're looking for? And to be able to sort of check your ego at the door and be like, just because I made it through SEAL training doesn't mean I'm the end all be all. Doesn't mean I know everything. Doesn't mean I'm great at everything. But here's a way for me to get good, or here's a way for me to be great.
Yeah. No, I think that's so well said, and I think to your point, it's one of those things that sometimes it's as simple as asking the question, right?
Yeah.
It's just, are you willing to do that? And I think if you are, as you mentioned, things open up for you and, those that you work with as a result that way. I realize we've talked extensively about the personal side of this. One of the things I've been curious about is I feel like every day people talk to me about new technologies that come out that way. And obviously, the tech space is evolving and growing rapidly with AI and all kinds of other crazy things that exist that way. In relation to what you do with the Community First project, where does technology integrate into the instruction that you give to these first responders, that way, and how has that kinda evolved or changed over time? Because this is an area, once again, at least thinking about myself, I don't think I fully understand and appreciate what technological advancements have been made and what integrates into this population.
So, there's a bunch of answers I could give. I think the simple answer is probably the low hanging fruit here, which is there are things that guys can implement. Like for a long, long time, when I learned to shoot pistol, we were shooting on iron sights, which for anybody who's a shooter out there, you understand the gun comes stock with two rear sight posts and a front sight post. And you got to line them up in order to put your rounds on paper. Within probably the last 8 to 10 years, red dot sights have become very prevalent within pistol shooting. And red dot sights, for anybody who's ever shot iron sights and shot a red dot, is like a cheat code. It makes you immediately a better shot as soon as you start being able to use that. So we try to teach these guys to implement red dot shooting if they're not already doing it. That's going to elevate their level of shooting right from the draw. If you're in a lethal engagement with somebody and you have a split second advantage because you have a red dot over iron sights, that's huge. And then other things like, we started maybe a year ago, we started implementing, like video recording technology, like, the Meta glasses that you wear. They're like the Ray-Bans, and yeah, you have a
Yep.
little record feature on them. They're awesome. So when I'm teaching a group, we'll go through, I'll be taking video on the Meta glasses. And then when we get to the end of the run, rather than just me talking them through the points that I saw and then being like, well, I don't really know what you're talking about, so maybe it's hard to conceptualize. I've already downloaded that video onto my phone. I pull everybody around. I say, here's what I saw in this room. Here's what you did. Here's what you did. And it's not always, not that it's wrong all the time, but just that I want them to see what I saw them do. Cause maybe sometimes they did it so quickly, they didn't realize that they did that thing. And me saying this movement, you positioning yourself here, or you doing this, could have left you exposed, could have left your buddy exposed, and then sort of giving them some insights and allowing them to conduct their own training. And then there's a lot of things that, I would encourage anybody who's in that space or really any other space to use, like VR training. I mean, the amount of tools at your disposal to use, like dry firing or VR headsets to go do like house clearance on VR headsets. I know a lot of like professional athletes are using that for like to read defenses or something like that. And I think there's so many tools out there that is now you can get 60%, a 60% solution of what your training needs to be in your living room while you're not working. And then that way, when you have to go through the actual muscle memory type of reps, you're like, I've seen this, I've done this, I've conducted dry fire, I've seen this on VR, I've watched videos of me doing this. And, the more you can see yourself or the more you can visualize yourself doing something, you're creating those neural pathways, right? You're myelinating those nerves and you're allowing yourself to have better reaction times and better instincts without actually going and doing the clearance at full speed, you know?
Absolutely, and you hit on something that I've started to recognize more and more is just how important the neural side of this is, right? Like, I think a lot of times we think about the physical constructs, the biomechanical constructs, when in reality, I think the neurophysiological side is just as important, if not more important to this, which is absolutely incredible, that I say that because I am someone who at least in college, was an absolute meathead, hated neuroscience, and just, it was bigger, faster, stronger. And I've started to realize that there's more to it than that. And even when I was in school, like you mentioning about the mental reps, that used to be something I did before any kind of hands-on practical. It's right.
Mhm.
Like, take a minute, pause mentally, kind of like zoom out and picture yourself doing the skill perfectly. What does it look like? Where do your hands go? What is your body positioning? And you think through all these things and you just mentally rep that out over and over and over again. I think it's one of the most effective things that we can do, technology present or not present that way. So I think that's absolutely incredible. And to your point about the meta glasses, I think it's been so impactful. I recently got a pair and I've been amazed at just kind of the personal feedback you can get from literally just being able to replay what you see in your point of view in any line of work that way. It's like, you can go back and just watch through whatever you were recording and the amount of things you miss in the moment is crazy, right? Like how much
Mhm.
is going on in the world so quickly that you don't even recognize. So I think that's really incredible to see those incorporations kind of into the tactical space that way, and I can't wait to see what continues to come from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And and there's other applications too. Like I am not by any means a great golfer, but if I want to know what's wrong with my golf swing and I just go out there and swing the clubs 100 times, I still may not know what's wrong. But if I set up a little GoPro and film myself swinging the golf club 20 times and then go back and look at it and analyze that next to a video of somebody doing it the right way, I get that immediate visual feedback of, oh, my hips are out of alignment or my lead arm isn't straight or I'm not following through with my shoulders or whatever it is, right? And you get more because most of us are visual and then kinesthetic learners. And so I get more out of seeing it and then being able to feel it than I do out of just somebody telling me because sort of I think third on the priority of learning, I think it's visual, correct me if I'm wrong here, visual, kinesthetic, and then audio. Most of us are not great audio learners. Somebody tells us how that we did something wrong and tells us how to correct it, and we're not really fixing it. But if I
Right.
can see it and I can feel my way through it, then I'm probably gonna get it.
Absolutely. No, I think you're spot on that way, man. And I realize we've talked extensively about the work that you do on the day to day with Community First Project and the work that you've done thus far. I'd love to hear just personally for you that way, dude. How do you kind of fill your own cup? Are you someone going out and just hitting the trails and running 20 miles a day, or what is kind of your own kind of physical, mental kind of resiliency routine look like on the day to day?
Yes, I think there's a lot of components to it. I still do. I'm still an avid 4 to 5 days a week in the gym, 3 to 4 days running, either trails or road running. Um, I'm signed up for a 10K in March in Virginia Beach. I'm signed up for a half marathon in Nashville in April. And I derive something out of just being able to still continue physically challenging myself. To some extent, I do still fill my cup because I'm a constant learner and I love going out and when I'm teaching the to go out and iterate the shooting skills because it keeps me in the tactical mindset of, yeah, I haven't been a SEAL now for 2 years. I retired in 2024, but I still get to go out and shoot and hone those skill sets. I still get to go out and teach and train and think through the mindset of like, if I had to take down this building, how would I do it? And so that fills my cup a little bit. And then, like you and I've talked about a little bit before, I am constantly engaged in extracurriculars, whether it's working with the Carolina Cowboys PBR team and some part-time work as a translator with Brazilian bull riders, which I really enjoy. Those guys are tough as nails and, humble, salt of the earth kind of guys. I love doing that. I love engaging with guys like our mutual friend Travis, who when I met him was with the Chiefs and then came over and worked at Virginia High Performance, the sort of like rehab and physical recovery program for retiring SEALs. And then now he's gone on to work for Penske, what he's doing there. And we exchange ideas all the time, whether it's about fitness or mental performance or high performing teams or what it takes to be a part of those things. Because on the mental side, or even this conversation, it stimulates me to think through those things, and I have a number of people that I greatly respect and admire, like Travis and like you and like my friend Alice Atalanta, who I mentioned earlier, like my friend Ryan Muncie, people who are in that like mental performance and human performance space. And that's really, I think on the mental side, that really fills my cup, gets me, I think that thinking in those realms is really substantive for me.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a really good breakdown, and I'm excited to see how you do with the upcoming 10K and half marathon. And I think that's such a great way to keep yourself kind of going and add a competition element to things as well. Because kind of as you mentioned before, I think that competition element has a way of bringing out the best in us, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
a race where there's a time component or whether it's a top 5, bottom 5 ranking that way, everyone always wants to be the best. And when you bring in that competitiveness, you foster the best version of yourself that
Mhm.
way. So I think that's an absolutely incredible breakdown. And to your point as well, that constantly learning. And that's one of the reasons I love to have conversations as a physical therapist with all these people that don't have a physical therapy degree, because I learn just as much, if not more, from talking with
Mhm.
non-PTs about PTs as I do PTs, which is probably a little bit of a hot take, and it's probably one that our professional association will have a different opinion on, and that's perfectly okay. But I think the more you get out there and have conversations with people and figure out how stuff works and some of these different frameworks, the more you can kind of apply outside ideas to your own line of
Yeah.
work. I think the more effective you become and the better you become at kind of thinking outside the box. Everyone says
Mhm.
that, but I don't think anyone really knows what it means at first
Or even
until
knows what
until
the box is that they
yeah.
should be thinking outside of.
Right, and who is they in the first place that's
Yeah,
saying it, right? But it's
yeah.
like, I think basically when I say that, I interpret it as it is such a creative, unique way to think that everyone else would look at it and say, "I've never thought about it like that." And
Right.
if you can make that your default mode, you are on a good path, in my opinion.
Well, and it's fascinating for me, like you said, to have this conversation because even though I'm somebody who's on the outside of the PT world, when I was in college, that was what I was studying. I went to school for
Yep.
kinesiology. I was in my second year of studies. 9/11 happened. I dropped out. So to see you taking that profession to its fullest expression and to be able to have these conversations is really, that's why I say it kind of fills my cup in that way because I'm like, at one point, you are where I wanted to be. And so we had, like I talked about earlier, picking somebody who is where you wanted to be. And so it's fascinating to have these conversations. And I think you're totally on the right track, right? And we talk about racing and why that sort of is an important component of if you just train, 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 you're just spinning your wheels. And I like racing to me is that positive stress. You line up there on race day, it's make or break, hero or zero, it's you against you, right? And I like that stress component of being like, is my training in place? Am I on point with where I need to be? Did I put in enough miles? Am I gonna, show up and perform or am I not going to? And I'm a big fan of the idea, the mindset of we don't rise to the occasion, we fall to the level of our training.
I love that. I love that quote, Gus. I realize you and I can probably talk about this stuff all night long because we're really just scratching the surface here.
For sure.
Is there anything we missed as we were chatting today or anything else you wanted to share with people listening, either about yourself or the work you're doing with Community First Project or anything of that sort?
No, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. Been a fantastic conversation. Again, for the listeners, please go to c1p.org, check it out. There's a donate button. If you feel it on your heart, please make a donation. It helps us train law enforcement nationwide. And, support your men and women in uniform, whether that's military uniform, law enforcement uniform, because they're out there really trying to protect the communities that they serve. So, fantastic to talk with you, Dan. Always, like you said, I could talk to you all night. Super interesting stuff to me, but I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure having you here, Gus. And for people listening who want to find out more about you that way, LinkedIn, Instagram, where are you at these days?
Yeah, LinkedIn under my name, Karl Gustavson. Instagram, I'm at KGUS245. You can go check me out. There's also community_first_project. I know it's a bit cumbersome, but that's the C1P website, Community First Project. Go check them out. We post videos all the time, the departments that we're training with, training tip Tuesday and all that kind of stuff. So any support is good support. Share with your friends. And then, there's a host of podcasts and all that kind of stuff that I've done before. You can check those out. I think if you go on Apple Podcasts and just search my name, there's been a bunch that I've been on, and always love doing it. It's always great exchanging ideas with other like-minded people who are out there doing the most good in the world. And so it's fun.
Absolutely, Gus. Like I said, I really appreciate you personally making the time for this that way and all the work that you're doing, man. Keep it up and always here if you need anything, man. Thank you again.
Appreciate it, brother. We'll talk soon.